Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online. News that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Hello and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Anthony Moreno. According to the New Mexico Secretary of State's office, over 66% of eligible New Mexico voters cast ballots in this year's general election. We'll talk about the results later in the program with Algernon D'Ammassa with the Las Cruces Bulletin. First, we take a look back at Election Day. Producers Christian Valle and David Vasquez III talked to voters who shared more about the issues that brought them out to the polls.
This is part of our community is to vote and choose the president that you like to serve for the next 4 years. And we want the president to be passionate about the people that are being killed in Palestine, so they have to find justice and not just look on one side. No, they have to look on both sides. And the reason why there is war in the Middle East is that because there is no justice.
The issue this year for me is the cost of living. It's a tremendous increase. It's unaffordable, and I think it should be corrected.
The issue that matters most to me right now is the issue with the abortion banning. You know, taking away the rights of the women.
I would like to see our government, our country, go back to being a republic, and I would like to see term limits imposed on Congress.
Securing the borders better, and I think seeing the economy get better, and prices drop, gas, groceries, everything, housing. Yes, I think that's the biggest thing.
What issue matters the most to me during this election and why? I would say the border, one. I would say working class people like me, the middle class people, and what matters the most is what they're gonna do for me, what they're gonna do for us, what they're gonna do for my grandma, what they're gonna do for everybody.
I just want the best for our country, and I just want, us to all come together as the, people of the United States, and just to be united again, and for us to become a united nation again.
Tax exemption for other veterans, because the first one was 100% disabled veterans. The other one was just increase the tax exemption for other veterans that are not 100% disabled. So I wanted to make sure that I cast a vote for both of those issues.
I certainly want Roe versus Wade turned over. I absolutely do. I want to ensure that Medicare and Social Security remain intact.
For us, and me personally, for my age, the most important thing is the benefits we have, and also my principles as a citizen. And that is very important to see where our president will take us during these times.
I
think division is a big one, and crime. Crime is really out of control. People are very divided. I think we need to really figure out how to get back together to be more American again, more united as a people.
Of course, the economy is always bad. I mean, taxes are always being raised, and I mean, minimum wage is always going up too. It's like every 6 months, minimum's always going up for some odd reason, and I don't even know why, and I feel like I should know because, I'm an everyday worker.
On election night, KRWG Public Media was out talking to candidates, supporters, and volunteers to get their thoughts and takeaways from this election. Members of the KRWG team were at Democratic and Republican watch parties. Producer Courtney Hill was at an election night watch party for recently reelected Democratic Congressman Gabe Vasquez to hear what other Democratic candidates, elected officials, and supporters had to say about this election.
I think for a lot of people, we're very happy to be here this night just because the election season has been very ugly. There's been a lot of misinformation, a lot of slam mailers, and I think we're all ready to see the results and ready to move the country forward. Not only just the country, but also the state of New Mexico.
This is my first time not to have opposition, and after so many races since 2012. So, but sharing what other candidates and helping their campaigns has really been exciting. And I think tonight everybody will have a lot of relief, one way or the other, but hopefully with great success.
And I tell you, the benefit of having a good representative in Congress to help us with local needs is primo. It's like the best.
I'm a little bit nervous because I'm Gabe's mom. So, yeah, we're hoping for the best for him. And I know that he has done a superb job the first 2 years, and he has done everything for the people of this state. So whomever wins, they have a big responsibility.
Republican candidates in Doña County held watch parties on election night. Johnny Coker was covering the GOP in our area. He talked with Republican candidates and party officials to learn more about their local campaigns.
New Mexico polling wasn't even closed yet when Republican District Attorney candidate Michael Cain began his election night party, barbecuing with friends and family at his law office in Las Cruces. Cain said he was pleased with the campaign he'd run and felt that the concern around public safety is what motivated citizens to get out the vote.
People are concerned, obviously, about the level of crime and violent crime in the community. They're concerned about I don't want to say homeless, but the crime from certain homeless people. I'll try to speak specifically. There are a certain segment of homeless people that are committing most of the crimes of homeless people. They're concerned about people not having access to mental health treatment if they're involved in the criminal justice system. Those are themes that we keep hearing over and over.
Just down the street in Mesilla, multiple Republican candidates gathered to watch as local and national race results came in. David Tofstad ran for the state's District 36 Senate seat in an attempt to unseat incumbent Democrat Nathan Small. Tofstad said that beyond public safety, primary concerns voters presented to him had to do with bail and competency reform in New Mexico's criminal justice system.
I do hope we see a turn towards rational thinking in state government, but I kind of doubt it. We're in the throes of a lot of people who just vote instinctively for Democrats, but what we need is voices out there who are saying, hey, let's think about who we're voting for and why we're voting. And I just feel like we need to change the way we're going in this state.
Both Tofstad and Cain lost their election bids to Democratic candidates, according to unofficial election results from the New Mexico Secretary of State. And while the party didn't get the results they wanted in the Congressional District 2 race between Democratic incumbent Gabe Vasquez and Republican challenger Yvette Harrell, Henry Young, chair of the county Republican Party, said he was encouraged by what he saw throughout the evening.
Everything has to start at the local level because grassroots is where government actually works. And if we don't make those inroads at the grassroots level as far as being able to get along with each other and work things out, we're never going to see it nationally. But I am looking forward to the time when everyone can come together around the table, whether it be in the House, the Senate, or just local government, in order to do what is best for the constituency everywhere.
As election season comes to an end and New Mexico moves towards its next legislative session, it's almost certainly going to take some bipartisan work in order to solve New Mexico's most pressing issues at the state and local level. For KRWG Public Media, I'm Johnny Coker.
On Election Day, New Mexicans across the state went to the polls to weigh in on who they wanted to represent them in our nation's capital, Santa Fe, and in our local communities. Here to share some insight into what we learned on election night is Algernon D'Ammassa, managing editor with the Las Cruces Bulletin. Algernon, thank you for joining us.
Well, hello. Good to be back.
Well, it's great to have you to talk about what we learned on election night, what we're still trying to understand as well. Let's start off with the U.S. Senate race in New Mexico. Incumbent Democratic candidate Martin Heinrich pulled away with the victory over Nella Domenici. What were some things that you think we learned from this race?
So Martin Heinrich had a decisive endorsement from voters for his third term in the Senate, a 55% share of the vote. But it was no embarrassment for the challenger. This is a first-time office holder, first-time candidate Nella Domenici, who of course comes with a very respected last name in New Mexico politics. She's the daughter of the late Senator Pete Domenici, who held office for a very long time. So we'll see what more we may be hearing from Nella Domenici. In the meantime, Martin Heinrich is going back to the Senate. However, he's going back as a member of the Senate minority. A lot of Martin Heinrich's kind of story about re-election and his service has been about his service on the Appropriations Committee, which allowed him to bring home a lot of bacon to the state in terms of law enforcement assets, federal assets, research money, money for agriculture programs and economic development. Now he's going back to the next Congress as a member of the minority, and I'm sure he's having to think carefully about how he approaches his service to the state as a member of a minority in a Republican-controlled Senate.
This is, of course, a federal contest. What were some of the big topics and issues we saw in this campaign?
Well, that's kind of interesting. So Martin Heinrich, very aware that Donald Trump was on the top of the ballot, really kept the focus on some of the national issues. He talked a lot about abortion rights. He talked a lot about some of those other kind of top issues that come up when we're discussing the Donald Trump campaign. Nella Domenici probably wisely kept bringing it back to some of the statewide issues and the concerns about security at the border, law enforcement in the border region, and New Mexico's results for education and concerns about crime. She played those issues against him for all that she could, get out of that to try to chip away at a tendency for senators to serve life terms and to be easily reelected. And she really went after him on statewide issues while he stayed with some of the top line national news headlines.
Okay, another race that a lot of people are paying attention to, not only in New Mexico, but across the country, was the 2nd congressional district race in New Mexico. Incumbent Democratic candidate Gabe Vasquez won over Yvette Herrell, the Republican candidate, according to unofficial results that we have right now. Mm-hmm. Now, this campaign got a little nasty when it came to the dirt that was thrown around in this campaign. Mm-hmm. We saw that with television ads, radio ads, social media, a lot of money focused in this campaign.
Yeah, the ads really did a lot of the talking for the candidates. There was not a debate between the two candidates this time around. This is a story about a district that has changed recently. It was not always a swing district. And it was, of course, redrawn after the 2020 redistricting process. However, still somewhat competitive, even though it leaned towards Democrats now. Gabe Vasquez became the first Democrat reelected in this district since 1978.
Wow.
Harold Runnels was the Democrat who served for nearly a decade. He actually died in office in 1980. And since then, it has typically been held by Republicans, and occasionally Democrats have found a single term here or there. This was a rematch, of course, against Yvette Herrell, who was the Republican that last held that seat for a single term. It was also Yvette Herrell's 4th consecutive run for this office. She's spent much of the last decade running for Congress or serving in Congress. And it was a momentous moment. Gabe Vasquez overcame a lot of personal attacks. Oppo researchers digging deep into whatever they could find. They had to find things from 20 years ago when he was apparently a pretty hot-headed college student, some misdemeanor citations and run-ins with the law, things like that. But he overcame that with a story about his own history in the border region, growing up in El Paso and Juarez, and his service to the agriculture community in this district, and he came through with that message, and voters actually elected him by a pretty much of a larger margin than this really thin victory that he managed in 2022.
What seem to be some of the big issues that were being thrown around in this debate? I mean, there were some personal attacks, of course, what we've seen with the ads, but the issues that people were talking about in this race.
Sure. So while Yvette Herrell and Herrell's supporters were trying to stir up fear about Gabe Vasquez's character, the Vasquez camp and their supporters were trying to stir up fear about Yvette Herrell maybe voting for a nationwide abortion ban. Again, sort of these top line issues that come up in the presidential campaign. Yvette Herrell and her support for various other conservative causes. When it comes to issues within the district, Yvette Herrell talked a lot about law enforcement, as well as wanting to ease a lot of the regulations that have come, environmental regulations, regulations on the petroleum industry, things like that. Gabe Vasquez brought his story back to helping agriculture, helping economic development, seeing the border less as a scary sort of horror movie about immigration and more about this engine of economic development that would lift up New Mexicans. And I think that probably is a message that resonated in the district.
I see. Let's move on and talk about some contested state Senate races in our area. District 36, incumbent Democratic candidate Jeff Steinborn wins over Republican David Tofstad with 56% of the vote, according to unofficial election results from the Secretary of State's office. What seem to be some of the big issues in this race that the candidates were discussing?
Well, so David Tofstad, who is a local Republican leader, he's been their chairman in the past. He's very important in the county party. He managed his, he kept his issues a lot about, again, law enforcement, concerns about crime, concerns about security at the border, and associating that with crime. Jeff Steinborn has been in the Senate for a while. He was in the House before that. He's been in the legislature for a long time. He is sometimes a little bit of a loner on some issues within his party, within his caucus, but very strong on conservation, very strong on economic development, and in particular the film industry, as well as viewing outdoor economics as a potential for diversifying the industries that bring in revenue for New Mexico. And he came in as a pretty, he tends to run pretty strongly. He's a tough incumbent to beat in Doña Ana County, and so I don't think that margin of victory was a big surprise.
Let's move on and talk about a very close race, the Senate District 38 race that featured Democratic candidate Carrie Hamblin running for re-election against Republican candidate Samantha Barncastle-Salopek. A very close race that was separated by, just a couple hundred votes, it seems like, just over that, according to our recent check on unofficial results. So what seemed to be the big issue in this race? And can you share a little bit about what we heard from the candidates? These are two well-known candidates in the area.
Correct. So Carrie Hamblin, of course, is the director of the Las Cruces Green Chamber of Commerce, and in her term in the Senate, she has been a leading voice on renewable energy, and seeing that as both a way to reduce the threat of climate change and to bring in some new ideas about economic development and industry in the state. She, of course, unseated a longtime Senator Mary Kay Papin, and that was over reproductive rights. That was over the issue of abortion. There was this wave of younger progressive Democrats challenging more established, long-time serving people in the House and Senate who had joined Republicans to oppose measures to ensure protection of abortion rights. So that's also an issue on which she has stood pretty firmly. And she still does. She's also brought a lot of capital to her district. and is a big voice for economic development. Samantha Barncastle-Salopek wanted to bring in a more conservative voice on how we approach new industry and new development. And I think with this candidate, you see something that's happening in the state Republican Party that is important and I think healthy, which is they're finding this new bench of candidates as well as potential party leaders who, through the election process are establishing themselves and finding an audience in Doña County, which is strongly blue. This was a very close contest, and she had a lot of support. She did a lot of fundraising of her own, but she also had a lot of support from an outside PAC that said explicitly, this is a rising star in the party. I'm sure we'll be hearing from her again.
Okay, now you touched on something, that we should probably stop and talk about is just the Republican Party in New Mexico finding that bench and having a stronger showing in this election.
Oh, absolutely. Again, Nella Domenici lost by 10 percentage points, but it was no humiliation by any means. And so think about the fact that Mark Ronchetti, who challenged Senator Ben Ray Lujan a few years ago, he actually performed by a percentage point less strongly than Nella Domenici did. And Mark Ronchetti's next move was to run for governor. Don't know if that's the trajectory that Nella Domenici sees for herself or if the party sees for her, but we're definitely finding candidates that strike a chord, that perform well, that are appealing, that can tell a story about the Republican Party in a time that Democrats have had such a strong hold on the governor's mansion as well as both houses of the legislature. They need to find that bench of new voices and a new generation.
Okay, we just have about 5 minutes left with you, but I want to move on to some House races and talk about those. Incumbent Democratic State Representative Nathan Small is going to retain his seat over a close race with Republican challenger Kimberly Skaggs. What were some takeaways with this race?
Surprisingly close contest there. Nathan Small has been in the House for a long time. He, of course, is chair of the House Finance Committee, which is a very powerful committee. He's really very much at the center of how the budget is shaped in Santa Fe. And offhand, I don't remember a time that he's had quite this close an election challenge. And Kim Skaggs has run before, performed much more strongly this time. Again, a lot of fundraising support, I think, helps with that. A lot of this was done through media ads. It's expensive to run for office. She had a lot of support there. And I think that there's just a message that more people are coming around to hearing coming from these new Republican candidates.
Well, speaking of Republican candidates, there were a lot of people in District 38 we're listening to Rebecca Dow's message, the Republican challenger in that race. She appears to be winning over Tara Jaramillo by 384 votes as we checked this morning, according to unofficial results from the Secretary of State's office. Dow wins this seat that she held from 2017 to 2022. What does that really tell us about this interesting district?
Rebecca Dow is well known. She's popular in the district. She's popular in the region. She ran for governor. That's why she left that seat. She made a primary run for governor that she did not win. It was Mark Ronchetti that ended up being the candidate. So now she's back. In the meantime, Democrat Tara Jaramillo, first-term Democrat in that seat, in a district that, by the way, has also changed quite a lot in the redistricting process. Tara Jaramillo went there as kind of a centrist, somewhat conservative Democrat, although very strong on women's rights and reproductive freedom. And she had what seemed to be a very successful first term. She seemed to be a candidate for leadership within her caucus, but it may not go her way this time. Rebecca Dow looks like she's on track to reclaim her seat.
I want to close with the House races with District 53. Now, this was a race that a lot of folks had their eyes on. Sarah Silva appears to be winning this race by just 138 votes. That's as of this morning when we checked. according to the Secretary of State's office. A very close race with Republican challenger Elizabeth Winterowd. Silva joined this race very late in the campaign. Can you kind of share a little bit about that?
What a story. So this is a district that was for a long time represented by people from Chaparral. It was Rick Little, it was Willie Madrid, and the two of them ran against each other a bunch of times. Willie Madrid got unseated in the primary this year by John Hill. John Hill, almost immediately after that primary, fell ill, and he actually died in August. So there was a very unusual process. He had endorsed Sarah Silva, and a well-known community organizer who had not run for office before. He had endorsed her. There was a process. A party committee ended up nominating her. And this was a contest between her, a Las Cruces Democrat, and Elizabeth Winterowd, also a Las Cruces Democrat. So this is a district that straddles Otero and Doña Ana counties. And it was a very close match. Elizabeth Winterowd has run before. She was more familiar in that district. And but Sarah Silva appears, as we're speaking, to have taken that race.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens as we move on. We only have about a minute left with you, but I want to talk about kind of an issue that a lot of people were talking about is the number of uncontested races that we had in our area and across the state. What were some takeaways that you got from looking at them? Some questions, perhaps?
Nominally, every seat in the legislature would have been up for election. However, a lot of seats around the state, including 7 in Doña Ana County districts, were uncontested. People are not stepping up, and I think that at least in part reflects that our legislature is a part-time, unsalaried legislature. It's very hard to be a lawmaker in New Mexico unless you're able to have some independent revenue that lets you go up to Santa Fe for 30 to 60 days at a time. It's very difficult, and I think that that is a chilling effect on running for office.
Algernon D'Ammassa is managing editor with the Las Cruces Bulletin. Algernon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chow.
That's all for our program. Remember, you can stay updated with news anytime at krwg.org. I'm Anthony Moreno. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.